Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to pop the hood on the global economy and take a look at one of its most powerful, but also most misunderstood parts, shadow banking. You've probably heard the term thrown around, but what it really is and why it's so incredibly important, well, that's the story we're diving into right now. And that leads us to this huge central question for today. What if the very system that's supposed to fuel economic booms is also hardwired to cause catastrophic busts? That's the paradox we are going to unpack together. Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we have to start with a concept that drives, well, pretty much all of finance: the need for liquidity. In simple terms, liquidity just means having assets you can spend or trade in an instant, like cash. Just imagine a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity pops up, and you have to act now. You can't exactly wait a few weeks to sell a building, right? You see, in the world of high finance, having access to cash, or things that are just as good as cash, is absolutely critical to pouncing on those moments. This constant, massive demand for instant spending power, that's what we call the thirst for liquidity. So how in the world does the financial system satisfy this enormous thirst? Well, this is where things get really clever and, yeah, really risky. The system basically invents a brand new kind of money through something called shadow banking. First things first, let's talk about what we mean by traditional money. Think about a government-insured deposit in your bank account. It's rock solid. It's always worth what it says it's worth, no questions asked, because it's backed by a ton of super safe, high-quality stuff called collateral. You never have to worry if it'll be accepted, it's always liquid. Now, shadow money is different. It's designed to look and act just like real money. And most of the time, it works perfectly. But here's the secret. It's backed by less collateral and often riskier collateral. The research calls this fragile liquidity. It's a fair weather friend, liquid when the sun is shining, but the second a storm rolls in and uncertainty spikes, its money-like qualities can just, poof, evaporate. So you might be asking, why on earth would we create this risky stuff in the first place? Well, the answer, in one word, is efficiency. You see, the really safe collateral, like government bonds, is pretty scarce. Shadow money is a way to economize on that scarce resource. By using less collateral for every dollar of money it creates, the financial system can churn out a much, much larger supply of liquidity than it ever could using just traditional money. So you've got this incredibly powerful new tool for creating liquidity. What happens when you have a long, calm period of economic stability with very low uncertainty, like the era before the 2008 crisis that we call the Great Moderation? Well, the system gets completely flooded with shadow money. I mean, look at this. During these calm times, everyone, investors, banks, they start to think there's not much difference between the super safe money and this new super efficient shadow money. So, naturally, the cheaper, low collateral version starts to crowd out the expensive, collateral-heavy kind. It's not a small shift, it's a total takeover. And the effect of all this new liquidity? Oh, it's huge. Borrowing gets way cheaper, asset prices soar, and it fuels this massive boom in investment and economic growth. But here's the catch, the big but. This growth is built on riskier assets, the very same things being used as the not-so-safe collateral for all this shadow money. So right below the surface of this amazing boom, a dangerous fragility is quietly building up. So you have this engine running at full throttle, humming along beautifully. But what happens when that long period of calm is suddenly shattered by a big spike in uncertainty? Yeah, we all know the answer to that one, don't we? We watched it unfold in real time back in 2007 and 2008. All that hidden fragility, it's suddenly and violently exposed. The shadow money that everyone had been treating as perfectly safe suddenly looked incredibly risky. Key markets, like the one for asset-backed commercial paper, they didn't just slow down, they froze, solid. And, former Fed Chair Ben Bernanke just nailed it when he described what happened. He said investors ran. They didn't walk, they didn't jog, they ran away from anything that looked even remotely like shadow money, and they all desperately clamored for the safety of traditional, fully backed money. This wasn't just a run on a few banks, it was a run on the entire shadow financial system. And look at this. The reversal is just staggering. The fragile liquidity that had fueled the entire boom, it vanishes almost overnight. The whole system, which had been dominated by efficient shadow money, now frantically demands the safest traditional money. The problem is, because the whole system was built to save on collateral, there just isn't nearly enough to go around. The engine grinds to a halt. Okay, so that explains the crash. But it also helps explain something else that's always puzzled people. Why, after the dust finally settles, is the recovery often so painfully, brutally slow? Why doesn't the economy just snap right back? Well, to get that, we need to wrap our heads around this really fascinating and kind of counterintuitive idea that the source research calls the collateral decelerator. It's a huge reason that recoveries from these kinds of crises are so sluggish. Okay, so here's how this weird paradox works. Right after a crash, everyone is terrified. They all pile into the absolute safest assets they can find. That's collateral mining. Then, as confidence slowly starts to creep back, some brave souls start creating shadow money again to try and get the growth engine restarted. But, and this is the crazy part, the very act of reintroducing that risky, fragile liquidity makes the whole system feel riskier again. This renewed sense of risk then pushes down the value of the collateral everyone is holding, which keeps liquidity tight and puts the brakes on the recovery. It's wild. So, what this all boils down to is a massive, fundamental trade-off, an inescapable dilemma that sits right at the heart of our modern financial system. It's like we're standing at a crossroads with a really stark choice. On one hand, we can have an economy with shadow banking. That gets us tons of liquidity and faster growth, but it leaves us vulnerable to these absolutely devastating crises. On the other hand, we could have an economy without it. That would be far more stable, sure, but with less liquidity, less investment, and ultimately slower growth for everyone. All right, so let's tie this all together. What are the big takeaways here? First, shadow banking isn't some evil villain. It's a powerful tool that creates fragile liquidity to solve a real problem, not enough safe collateral to go around. This supercharges growth during the good times, but that efficiency comes at a steep price. It builds hidden fragility that leads to severe busts and then those slow, painful recoveries because of that collateral decelerator effect. It is the classic high-risk, high-reward dilemma. And that leaves us with the billion-dollar question, doesn't it? A question for policymakers, for economists, for all of us, really. We all want the growth, but can we afford the bust? Is the risk of a massive crisis a price worth paying for those faster growth years? There is absolutely no easy answer, but understanding how this hidden engine actually works is the critical first step. Thanks so much for digging into this with me.